Sam Altman goes on an interview to talk about when he expects artificial superintelligence to emerge, his final word on whether or not AI progress is hitting a wall, the fallout between Microsoft and OpenAI, what's really up with the Elon Musk lawsuit against him and OpenAI. Let's take a look at the most interesting pieces of this interview. This was recorded on the 4th. So when they're talking about the live stream that it will be happening tomorrow by OpenAI, that's on the 5th. So technically today, and I'm hoping to do a live stream to cover that. So stay tuned and away we go.
Almost to this week, basically, you launched ChatGPT. And I think it's fair to say that when you press the button, since then, all hell has broken loose. It
does feel like that.
It did feel like the starter's pistol going off in the kind of a race for AI. Now, Sam Altman made a somewhat controversial statement about when he expects artificial superintelligence to get here, ASI. So it's as if almost they're saying, okay, we got the AGI in the bag already. The next step is, the next stop is ASI. When is that going to get here? Here's Sam Altman's take. It's surprisingly close.
You said that it is possible that we will have superintelligence in a few thousand days from now. 2 years ago, did you think that? And when you say a few thousand days, I can do various versions of math on what that means.
Well, there is wide uncertainty, and there's also different definitions of what superintelligence is. Yes, 2 years ago, we thought we were on a pretty steep curve. We started OpenAI because we thought this was possible and maybe not that far away. And it has gone well, but we hoped it was going to go well. Like we believed in deep learning as this unbelievable new discovery of humanity and thought it could go here, and we had a duty to get it here and to make it go well and to broadly share the benefits. But yeah, we did think we could get here, and we still believe we can get here. It's not for sure. There's a ton of hard work, a ton of research and engineering still to do, but I think it's possible. And I think it's possible not super far in the future. I expect that in 2025, we will have systems that people look at, even people who are skeptical of current progress, and say, wow, I did not expect that. That does change what.
Like what?
Agents are the thing everyone is talking about, I think for good reason. This idea that you can give an AI system a pretty complicated task, like a kind of task you'd give to a very smart human that takes a while to go off and do and use a bunch of tools and create something of value. That's the kind of thing I'd expect next year. And that's like a huge deal. We talk about that like, this thing is going to happen. But that's like, that. If that works as well as we hope it does, that can really transform things.
Okay, so what are we supposed to think? There's been a whole bunch of headlines in the past couple of weeks where people have talked actually about maybe that the scaling laws of AI actually are slowing down.
So The Information, which is an online publishing sort of magazine, usually has really good information about OpenAI and the various AI players that are in the space. It recently has been publishing a lot of stuff about scaling laws hitting a wall. So this idea that our progress is slowing down or plateauing. This sparked a whole bunch of speculation until one day, and the speculation is still continuing, but one day Sam Altman posts this tweet saying, there is no wall. Now, the way I'm thinking about it is we can continue progress of improving AI across different sort of frontiers, right? So we have the scaling of the compute, various algorithmic improvements, etc. So even if one slows down, for example, there are still other frontiers on which we can improve and expand the AI progress. Sam Altman kind of refines that idea with his insider's perspective, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Maybe that the scaling laws of AI actually are slowing down. And you put out this, I don't know if it was cryptic or it was very direct. You put out a tweet where you wrote, there is no wall.
I don't see how it could be any less cryptic than that. Like, that was an attempt not to be cryptic at all and say, hey, this is going to keep going. In fact, hopefully this will put it to rest, at least for a while. I've always been struck by how much people love to speculate on, is there a wall? Is scaling going to keep going? And like, rather than just like look at the curve of progress and say, maybe I shouldn't bet against an exponential like that. In any case, we have a bunch of new great stuff. So we're doing this kind of fun thing for the holidays. We're doing 12 days of OpenAI.
The 12 days of Christmas is starting tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific, tomorrow being 12/05/2024. OpenAI is doing 12 days of OpenAI. Each weekday, we'll have a live stream with a launch or demo, some big ones and some stocking stuffers. As I'm sitting here and thinking about it, I kind of have to do a live stream of their live stream. I'm 99% certain I will do this. I will set up a schedule for that. So if you want to check it out, again, that's going to be Thursday, December 5th at 10 a.m. Pacific. Then again, Friday, and then again the following Monday. My guess is they're launching Sora somewhere near the end. There's been a lot of chatter. There's been data testers, including some hilarious hijinks with people releasing it a little bit to everybody, where Sora got leaked, that whole thing. There has been talks of an OpenAI browser, although that might be way in the future. And there has been talk about something similar to Anthropic's computer use, so the agentic thing that OpenAI might release. So I don't know. We're going to have to see. But tune in tomorrow to find out if we're going to see the big ones or the stocking stuffers. So next, there's a big back and forth whether or not Sam's going to reveal or hint at what's being released. Spoiler alert, he does not. He just refuses to give any hints. But they do come back to the whole there's no wall thing. Take a listen.
One of the big questions about AI right now, though, is, and this goes to the scaling question, is how much data and what it takes to actually continue to scale. How much of this is about just pure processing power and therefore capital, right? Versus data, where you get that data, this idea of synthetic data, digital data, that we're going to recreate data on top of data. What does it actually take to scale at this point? When people even talk about some of the limiting factors, I think that there's some question embedded in that about which piece is going to get there.
So the three key inputs, and there are others too, but the three key ones are compute, data, and algorithms. And you can trade them off sometimes. Like if you have much better data, you could use less compute. Or if you have a lot more compute, you could use that to create synthetic data and make more data. For a while, there was incredible easy gains in front of us with compute. More recently, we've had a lot of algorithmic gains. You want to push on all of those inputs at the same time. And at different times, there may be differential returns to one or the other, but I kind of think of all three.
But for you, compute, I assume, is the biggie. And if you don't have the compute, all the others don't matter.
I mean, in some sense, algorithmic progress is the biggest one. You know, if you can, maybe you can double the size of a computer. Maybe over time with crazy amounts of capital, you can 10x the size of a computer. Once in a while, these 1000x gains come along algorithmically. The transformer is like a good recent example of that. That's rare, but that is the biggest gain when it happens.
Transformers were the big sort of breakthrough in 2017 that I think it's fair to say that it kind of set off this AI race, or at least it was the thing that kind of unlocked the progress so people could start building on top of it. There has been some talk about Microsoft and OpenAI, some sort of a fallout between the two, some sort of a disentanglement, some sort of issues behind the scenes. This is, I believe, the first time that Sam Altman has commented on this. So here's sort of his take.
Who wrote, "It's clear that Microsoft and OpenAI are disentangling."
I don't think we're disentangling. Look, I will not pretend that there are no misalignments or challenges. Obviously, there are some. But on the whole, I think it's been a tremendously positive thing for both companies, and excited to do much, much more together.
But long term, do you think you need to have your own processing power that's yours, as opposed to relying on somebody else?
No. And in fact, I think we need to ensure that we get enough compute of the kind we want that we can rely on and all of that. And there may be reasons we have some very crazy ideas about things we'd like to build that are, high risk, high reward. But we certainly don't need to have OpenAI get really good at building massive scale data centers. In fact, one of the things, and maybe this is a consequence of kind of just how I grew up, but I grew up as one of those startup generation founders of the generation where it was before that period in time, everybody had to build their own hardware and you had these colos and data centers and it was this thing you had to do. And then all of a sudden AWS changed the scene.
Right.
And so I've always thought that way. I'm open to us, saying, okay, we are going to have to build stuff ourselves, or maybe vertical integration turns out to be more important over time. But it's really nice to get to focus on research and product and do what we're good at.
But one of the reasons I ask is it creates this sort of frenemy situation, I imagine. You have this relationship where you have Microsoft that's using your product in Copilot. You now have Apple using your product. And then you have your own version of a sort of native product that you sell commercially yourself. At some point, do the interests no longer become aligned? And I say that because there's been some reporting, including in the New York Times, that suggests that there has been frustrations about how much processing power and access you're getting, different requirements of things and services that folks at OpenAI are supposed to use that are Microsoft products and maybe they don't want to use. Just trying to understand all.
There's definitely at various times like real compute crunches. Again, our product has scaled. Like 2 years ago, we had almost no business. Now we have like more than 300 million weekly active users. We have, users are sending more than 1 billion messages a day to ChatGPT. We have a very large developer business. I think it's like 1.3 million US developers, many more in the world.
So you're saying, I believe, 300 million active weekly users. That seems huge.
So we need lots of compute, more than we projected. And that's just been like an unusual thing in the history of business to scale that quickly. And there's been tension around that. I have not heard people like upset about using Microsoft services though. We have a big platform business. We have a big first party business. Many other companies manage both of those things. And we have like things that we're really good at. Microsoft has things they're really good at. Again, there's not no tension, but on the whole, like I think our incentives are pretty aligned.
As you might know, there's this somewhat strange clause in the OpenAI charter that says that once they achieve AGI, sort of all bets are off. There's certain contractual obligations that are going to be no longer enforceable. There's a lot of speculation around that because what does that mean? What does it mean to achieve AGI? And then what does it mean to just like all contracts are null and void? It's a little bit of a weird clause in there. It seems like it might have been put there just to sort of give the research lab, the OpenAI, kind of as it started as a research lab, to give them a little bit more power to not get pushed around, to make sure that when they do achieve AGI, that AGI will be used for the benefit of all. That seems to be like that was the original intention. Some people are maybe questioning that a little bit, and we'll get to the Elon Musk's lawsuit versus them, the most recent one. So here's kind of Sam Altman's reasoning on that.
On the artificial general intelligence piece, though, because you've always said part of your deal with them is that if you ever get there, right, that then the deal could technically be called off. It sounds like you might be getting close.
We've also said that our intention is to treat AGI as a mile marker along the way. We have left ourselves some flexibility because we don't know what will happen. But my guess is we will hit AGI sooner than most people in the world think, and it will matter much less. And a lot of the safety concerns that we and others expressed actually don't come at the AGI moment. It's like AGI can get built, the world goes on mostly the same way, the economy moves faster, things grow faster. But then there is a long continuation from sort of what we call AGI to what we call superintelligence. Even at the AGI moment, I think there are things to be nervous about. I expect the economic disruption to take a little longer than people think because there's a lot of inertia in society, but then to be more intense than people think. So the first couple of years, maybe not that much changes. And then maybe a lot changes in the economy. I'm not a believer in the no work. I think we'll always find things to do, and with every major technological revolution, there's a lot of job turnover. But I would bet we will have never seen it go this fast. So I think there's things like that to worry about in the relatively near term.
But not these super dangerous things.
That stuff I think is further out than a system that can,
Do you have any faith that the government or somebody is going to figure out how to avoid that?
I have faith that researchers will figure out how to avoid that. I mean, there are going to be some.
I like that answer.
Let me caveat that a little bit. I think there's a set of technical problems that the smartest people in the world are going to work on. And, I'm a little bit too optimistic by nature, but I assume that they're going to figure that out. And we're working super hard. Others are working super hard. I think there's a lot of work in front of us, but I also think we have this we have this incredible piece of science called deep learning that can help us solve these very hard problems. I assume we'll get that right.
Next, we're talking about Elon Musk and XAI, as well as Amazon potentially being a competitor in the AI space.
It's a different question. And maybe it goes back to the issue of processing power. And I was going to mention Elon Musk is building his own processing, these huge processing power labs effectively to power XAI. And one of the reasons I was asking you whether you needed your own is because it seems like everybody is getting their own. We were just talking before to Ken about Elon Musk. Elon Musk has a sort of unusual relationship in your life over the years, both as a founder and somebody who's suing the company now. How much do you see XAI as a competitor? We talk about Google, obviously, all the time. And we talk about Anthropic and to some degree Microsoft. And I don't know where you think Amazon is. We'll talk to Jeff Bezos this afternoon. But how do you see that?
They're a competitor.
Do you think of them as one of your biggest competitors? I mean, it appears that they are coming on super strong.
Yeah, I assume they'll be a really serious competitor.
Did you expect that?
Yes.
You did?
Yes.
And what are they doing? And what are they doing? And how have they been able to literally spin up a company that feels, I'm not claiming it's comparable to what you're doing, but getting super close, super fast? Meaning, what is that?
Well, a lot of the models at the frontier are all pretty close now. But certainly tremendous respect for how quickly they built that data center.
Is that, by the way, do you fear that all this becomes commoditized as a result? I mean, if it seems like, I'm not saying anybody can do it, but it just seems like, what is your advantage? And by the way, what is your disadvantage?
I think the technology itself, to the degree you believe deep learning is just like, sort of like a law of physics, and that we discovered an important new piece of science, then yes, that part will be done by lots of people. Everybody has their analogy for what AI is like. You know, I saw Sundar's going to be here. He talks about it like electricity.
Mm-hmm.
A whole bunch of others. People talk about like the Industrial Revolution. Some people talk about like the Renaissance. The one I like is the transistor. There was a scientific discovery that a few companies discovered first, that transformed our society, that scaled unbelievably well. Like, when people talk about scaling laws, the best analogy for that, I think, is Moore's Law. And that came to be used by a lot of companies in all of the world. Like, look at all the things in this room with transistors, but we don't think about that as a transistor device, and we don't think about Google as a transistor company, even though they wouldn't be here without one. And I kind of think that's what's going to happen with AI. There will be shockingly capable models widely available, used for everything. And it will be inconceivable to people in the future that the devices, the products and services they use are not really smart. And they won't all call themselves AI companies or AI products. And in that sense, in some sense, the AI itself, the reasoning engine nature of it will become commoditized. And that's fine. That's good. Like, science should be just diffused throughout society. And that's why we're focused on building things like ChatGPT.
One of the other questions, and it is Elon related, is you are now moving towards having a for-profit.
So this is what we covered a couple of days ago. So Elon is launching basically a second lawsuit against Sam Altman. Sam Altman is the one that's named on there, basically saying that he should not be allowed to change OpenAI into a for-profit company. So it started out as this weird amalgamation of various different little sort of companies that were kind of put together, but at the very top was sitting a non-profit. So if I understand the structure correctly, like everything was quite kind of like the umbrella, the top of the org chart was the nonprofit. And so one of the quotes that stood out to me from there was Elon or his legal team basically saying, you can't have Microsoft and Sam Altman just change up their corporate structure from moment to moment, depending on what kind of is financially best for them or whatever appeals to them. And there's certainly truth to this idea, because if you have a nonprofit small research lab, you might get the higher caliber AI researcher that are willing to work on that as opposed to, going into doing some sort of a for-profit startup. So this could be seen as sort of a bait and switch, right? So this is what we advertise it as, and then, we're going to change it around so that we can now raise capital. And the counter argument is, hey, compute is super expensive, right? These NVIDIA chips are super expensive. NVIDIA is just printing money. And so in order to continue scaling, to continue developing, they need the funds. They need to be able to raise the funds. Now, I'm not saying one side is right or wrong. Those are just sort of like the two sides of the argument.
Component part of your business. Right now, it's a not-for-profit. And he, as everybody knows, if you read the papers, is suing you over this and many other things. How do you feel? I actually just want to ask you on a very personal level, forgetting about even the merits of the case. As a guy who has spent a lot of time with him and you guys founded this thing together, how do you feel personally today about all this? This is a
tremendously sad. I grew up with Elon as like a mega hero. I thought what Elon was doing was absolutely incredible for the world. And I'm still, of course, I have different feelings about him now, but I'm still glad he exists. And not just because, no, I mean that genuinely, not just because I think his like companies are awesome, which I do think, but because I think he like at a time when most of the world was not thinking very ambitiously, he pushed a lot of people, me included, to think much more ambitiously.
That's true.
And I'm grateful is like the wrong kind of word, but I'm like thankful. I'm positive about that. We started OpenAI together, and then at some point he like totally lost faith in OpenAI and decided to go his own way. And that's fine too, but I think of Elon as a builder and someone who, known thing about Elon, he really cares about being the guy. But I think of him as someone that if he's not, that just competes in the market and in technology and whatever else, and doesn't resort to lawfare. And, whatever the stated complaint is, what I believe is he's a competitor and we're doing well. And that's sad to see.
I got to ask you this. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal. You were in it. Jeff Bezos was in it. And some of the other people who are his main competitors were in it. And there was speculation in the article that folks like yourself were worried about his influence, not just his influence in the technology area, but given his close relationship now with the president-elect.
I'm actually not. I believe that pretty strongly, it may turn out to be wrong, but I believe pretty strongly that Elon will do the right thing and that Americans, it'd be profoundly un-American to use political power to the degree that Elon has it to hurt your competitors and advantage your own businesses. And I don't think people would tolerate that. I don't think Elon would do it.
Right.
It would go, again, lots of things not to like about him, but it would go so deeply against the values I believe he holds very dear to himself that I'm not that worried about it.
Okay, one last related question on that.
And Andrew Sorkin asked this next question that I thought was absolutely brilliant, really great, because one of the complaints in the lawsuit was specifically Sam Altman and the legal team sort of alleging that Elon Musk and the legal team alleging that Sam Altman and sort of Microsoft were trying to prevent people from investing in their competitors. So for example, from investing in XAI, but also preventing them from investing in Ilya Sutskever's company, SSI, Safe Superintelligence. And the way they did that, I believe, was they had a little clause in the contract of people investing in OpenAI saying those investors will not invest in competitors of OpenAI. So definitely curious to hear Sam Altman's sort of a rebuttal to that.
And then I actually want to talk a different tech question and about the company, which is one of the things that he alleged is that he thinks that you guys are now so big that there's not competition and that you're trying to prevent competition from happening by preventing potential funders of, for example, XAI or arguably others from both funding you and funding them at the same time.
Incorrect. What we said, which is very standard, or what we say is, if you invest in us and want to invest in any of our competitors, that's totally fine. We stop your information rights. You can still do it, but like is a very standard term for other companies of our scale. We're going to stop telling you our research roadmap. And everybody is like, that seems reasonable. But again, it's like, you want to go invest in them? Go invest.
Let me ask you a different question just about the company. You did start it as a not-for-profit. It was a research outfit originally.
Yeah.
Now, I think there's a view that it has to shift to be some kind of profit-oriented company.
Well,
does it have to?
First of all, I like to talk about the reason we started as a nonprofit because I think it sort of speaks to the answer too. When we started, We did not have any idea that we were going to be a product company. We also did not know that the amount of capital we needed would turn out to be so huge. If we did know those things, we would have picked a different structure. It's hard to overstate, because it wasn't that long ago on the calendar, but it's hard to overstate how different 2016 was. This was years before we had the research that led to language models.
I mean, just think about NVIDIA's stock price, right? So in, let's say, June 2016, it's $1.88, a 16,000% increase up to $145. I gotta say that logic that Sam Altman says kind of does make sense to me. If you knew how much compute, how much demand there would be for it, and assuming you can predict that NVIDIA would be sort of one of the main, if not the main beneficiary, I mean, you wouldn't be funding AI startups, you'd be funding, pouring all your money into NVIDIA stock.
This was 4.5 years before we launched our first product. This was like 6.5 years before we launched ChatGPT. All we knew that we wanted to do was do some AI research, and that we thought AGI and superintelligence eventually would be this important thing to the world. And we wanted to somehow do something that would be good. At the time, we were working on writing papers, new RL algorithms, new theories, way to play video games, a robotic hand.
They had a hand, yep.
And it was not clear that there would ever be a product or revenue stream at all. And it wasn't clear that we were going to need one, because it wasn't clear we needed so much money.
Right.
It became clear after GPT-1 and some other work that we were going to need to scale. And we started, and also Elon decided to stop funding us as a nonprofit, and we couldn't get somebody else to do it, that we needed to find a way to make a capped profit. Now, we wanted to keep going with a lot of the things that we think are good about a nonprofit. And so we had this subsidiary capped profit that worked for a while. And in some senses still does kind of work. And in some other senses is straining the theory of what a nonprofit controlled or can be and the amount of capital we need at this next stage. So we are, and have been for a while, looking at some changes. Nothing is decided. It is, as you can imagine, very complicated to figure this out. And the board is hard at work on it. In any configuration, the nonprofit doesn't go away. One thing that the board has looked at, for example, is a PBC that a nonprofit owns a huge chunk of and then figures out how to use that amount of wealth for the purpose of the nonprofit. There's other ideas too.
So here Sam Altman gets asked about not taking equity. However, again, one of the allegations in the lawsuit by Elon Musk is saying that while it's true that he has no equity and therefore he's qualified as I forget the terminology that they use, but it's kind of like a disinterested party. Basically, he doesn't benefit from OpenAI, but the reality is that there's a lot of startups that Sam Altman does have some stake in that he was able to influence through OpenAI, through how large that company was growing. In the paper, I believe they said the Humane Pin, using data from Reddit, using Stripe for payment processing. So there's 5 or 6 different items in there, and as well as RAIN neuromorphic chips, where Sam Altman did have equity, and he used OpenAI to sort of influence it to create deals with those companies. So you can say, and they called it in a lawsuit, self-dealing. So even though there's no equity, he might be sort of increasing his stakes in other companies by effectively controlling OpenAI. Again, that's the allegation. Now, Sam Altman basically talks a little bit about equity, saying he wishes he would go back and just take a little bit just so he doesn't have to answer this question again. Again, maybe just the scale of the operation kind of shocked everybody how quickly it improved. And the next question that's asked is actually about the New York Times lawsuit. The New York Times is suing OpenAI for training ChatGPT on the New York Times data. Now, we went through that lawsuit. It looked weird to me. The sort of examples that they've used looked, I don't want to say there was shenanigans going on, but I'm going to say allegedly there was shenanigans going on. Can I say that? So I would certainly be curious to know what Sam Altman sort of said about that, because again, he's at the New York Times Deal Book Summit. You got to have a bit of tact here.
Let me ask you this, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention it. It just so happens that the New York Times Company has a lawsuit against OpenAI and Microsoft over training on content. And there's a lot of content creators and other folks in this room who make their living off of content. And I'm just so curious, and I know you can't speak to the lawsuit itself, but for those folks who are in this room who've written books or written articles or made movies or what have you, that have had their information trained on whether it was on the open web or the closed web or on YouTube or what have you, how we should feel.
I think we do need a new deal, standard, protocol, whatever you want to call it, for how creators are going to get rewarded. I very much believe in the right to learn, or whatever you want to call it. And if an AI reads something, a physics textbook, and learn physics, it can use that for other things like a human can. I think those parts of copyright law and fair use really need to keep applying. But I think there's additional things that we're starting to explore, and others are, where, a particular passion of mine has always been, can we figure out how to do micropayments where if you generate a story in the style of Andrew Ross Sorkin, you can opt into that for your name and likeness and style to be used and get paid for it. There's many other ideas too. I think the discussion on fair use or not is at the wrong level. And of course, we very much believe in you need one of these right to learn approaches. But the part I really agree with is we need to find new economic models where creators can have new revenue streams. On the New York Times, look, I don't believe in showing up in someone else's house as a guest and being rude. But I will say, I think the New York Times is on the wrong side of history in many ways.
We can discuss and debate that. And we'll do that, I think, in court. Look forward to seeing you.
I don't think they have a good case.
My final question for you actually has almost nothing to do with technology, but maybe it does, which is you have a very exciting thing that's happening in your life.
So those are some of the highlights that I found interesting. I'll leave the link to the full interview in the show notes if you want to check it out. There are a few parts we left out. Very towards the end, Sam Altman talks about what he expects the next generation, the kids that are being brought up right now, kind of like what kind of a world they expect to live in. But all in all, a great interview. I feel like the questions that are being posed to Sam Altman nowadays are much better. They're much more informed, much more sort of incisive and getting to the point of the story. So hope you enjoyed that. Make sure you're subscribed. Hit thumbs up if you don't mind. That helps me get this content to more people. If you made this far, thank you for watching. My name is Wes Roth, and I'll see you next time.